I just off the boss of my family. One of the FBI's favorite little games to play back then was to place illegal wires. And yeah, they couldn't use it in court, but they could find out what was coming up and use that stuff in court. And then when they had enough, or when they got caught having illegal listening devices, that was fine too, because they would just release it to the media. They also had cops chasing gangsters everywhere. It was like one of those 1950s movies that you just see pandemonium break out. You're the government. If you want to do something, do it. But no, I'm not going to say that he won't die when you do it, because it's entirely possible that he will die. Hey, can I have a loan for $4 million? I'm gonna use it to buy heroin. But we as the American public had never learned about any of this. And we learned it for the first time right now when Joseph Bonanno takes the stand and testifies to all of it. You could make an argument that the Illuminati is the same kind of thing as the Mafia. That does not mean that I don't view these guys as the absolute bitches that they are for doing all these crimes and not being willing to do the time. Like, if you're out there and you're doing crimes and you're killing people and you're dealing drugs and you're doing this and that, you're probably going to go to jail. How Vito Genovese gave him the kiss of death. So he's now going through life knowing that he has a number on his head. His time is coming. So now, knowing that he's gonna die, he starts to look at things a lot different. Bro, every person from here on out that gets found guilty of being in this mafia, that's on you. And these two brothers fell in the same way that the rest of the Gambino family fell, at the hands of Sammy the Bull Gravano. But what I'm not about to do is sit here and listen to somebody that has been found guilty of his role in 19 murders call women that have had an abortion murderers. Absolutely not. Biondo was the underboss. He got really tight with Sam DeCavalcante, and he thought that he was going to go to Sam DeCavalcante and start doing business with him and hide it from Gambino so that he didn't have to give Gambino a cut of his earnings. So DeCavalcante told Gambino about it, and instead of whacking Biondo, Gambino was just like, all right, you're not going to be underboss anymore. We're going to put Neil Dellacroce in place, and that was really that. Thomas Eboli had borrowed $4 million from Carlo Gambino, and he used it to start a drug dealing business. The only problem was that his entire crew was arrested, and all the drugs that they had purchased were confiscated a few days after he made the initial purchase, so he had no way to pay back this loan. The occupants of both cars just unloaded on this Cadillac. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're new here, my name is Dana Trubiana, and I cover infamous gangsters every week in a true crime-like format. My show, Mob Times, comes out every Tuesday morning. Yes, I'm proud of that because it's been a month in a row. This is the greatest thing ever. I don't even remember the last time I've been on a streak this long. I stopped saying every Tuesday because I was doing a super shitty job of getting an episode out every single week, but I've been doing it amazing for a while now, and I'm super proud of it. So yeah, every Tuesday morning, you will find a new episode here. I've also recently started doing this thing where I'll be going live on Monday nights at 7 o'clock with Tommy Stiggs. So if you're around on Monday nights and you want to come hang out, you want to talk, you want to chat, you want to ask any questions, tune into the live on YouTube on Mondays. So far, I've only been able to get it on his channel live, but I'm doing my best to figure out how to get it onto my channel as well. So I'll put a link to his channel in the description of this video so you can go and watch the live on his page, but I'm gonna do my absolute best to try to make it so that it's live on my channel as well, so my viewers can tune in as well. And we are finally here at the long-awaited end and final part to Carlo Gambino. We will be wrapping him up tonight. I am so excited. I really didn't get sick of him. Usually by the end I'm like, ugh, I never want to hear this guy's name again. But really it hasn't been too bad this time. I think because I kept it to 4 parts, so I'm happy about that. I didn't overdo it. And let's just dive in and finish this up. So a quick summary of last week's episode. We went over in detail the Appalachian meeting. We went over who Joseph Bonanno was and everything that he did. We went over Thomas Eboli and how Carlo Gambino was involved in his hit murder. Who knows if Carlo Gambino even was involved. It's entirely possible that he wasn't even involved. And we went over numerous extraditions that the FBI attempted to carry out against Carlo Gambino during his time time as an illegal alien in the United States, which was pretty much his entire life. He stepped foot onto American soil as a 19 or 20-year-old kid. They almost immediately started trying to get rid of him, and they never did. And they never would have. So don't kid yourself into thinking that, oh, well, if Carlo Gambino had lived, I saw that on Reddit not too long ago. It was like a few days ago. Oh, well, if he had lived and been extradited to Italy, no. That man was never going to be extradited to Italy. They tried on numerous occasions to get him extradited. Was never going to happen. He died when he died, but if he had lived another 20 years, he would have lived those 20 years in America. He was a master manipulator. He was brilliant at using his medical ailments to his advantage, and he wasn't going anywhere. We went over how Carlo Gambino married his son Thomas off to the son of Tommy Three Fingers Brown Lucchese, and everything that went on with the brothers, and how they built a monopoly of a truck company, all for it all to be taken down by Sammy the Bull Gravano. So that should catch us up on everything that happened on part 3, and I did a summary at the beginning of each of the episodes before, so if you want to know more information, go ahead and watch parts 1, 2, and 3, but we should be caught up now. On November 12th, 1969, a memo was issued that stated that a case was under investigation. It stated that on November 10th, 1969, William Kenny, a special assistant of the U.S. DOJ task force in Boston, Massachusetts, advised that he is studying a case in terms of the venue and that Gambino should be considered armed and dangerous. The venue would later be moved to Brooklyn, and the charges that were being brought against Gambino and 4 other defendants were in regards to a $6 million heist of stolen money. Now, remember on the last episode, I was kind of offended that they said that Carlo Gambino was the boss of 6 families. This time they updated that number to 9 families, so I feel like it's a little more justice. Still not all the families, but at least this time around, they've got a little bit more respect for the number of families that were spread across the entire United States of the Mafia. On March 24th, 1970, a memo that was regarding these charges and his extradition to New York to stand trial in Brooklyn was released. This charge and everything that is surrounding it is explained on the FBI file on page 80. It says, Carlo Gambino, the most powerful racketeer in this country due to his dominant position in La Cosa Nostra's 9-man commission, was arrested in New York yesterday by our agents. He was charged with conspiring with others to violate the Interstate Transportation of Stolen Property statute. The conspiracy for which Gambino is being charged involved plans to rob the crew of an armored car in New York City from which the conspirators hoped to realize more than $5 million. Following his arrest, Gambino was arraigned before a United States commissioner in the Southern District of New York and released on a bond of $75,000. During that arrest, he was reported as being 5'7" and 150 pounds. On July 1st of the following year, the ADA reported that there was an actual crime in which a Brinks armored truck was robbed in New York City, and that the truck was carrying $3 to $5 million, and that Gambino himself was being expected to dispose of the money in the truck, because obviously these guys take down the serial numbers of the cash and they can't use that money. It's dirty money. They have to clean it. And that is where Carlo Gambino came in, according to this FBI paperwork. It stated that trial was to take place December 7th, 1970, but it had been postponed until the night. Now, although Gambino is reported on this paper to be armed and dangerous, the court had to be limited in the hours that they were trying him to only afternoon hours between 3 and 5 p.m. with 10-minute rest periods to help with mitigating issues with Gambino's heart issue. So he's so armed and dangerous. What a dangerous criminal. But he can't stand on trial for more than 2 hours. And during those 2 hours, he has to have 10-minute breaks. I'm pretty sure he had a heart attack during this trial, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was definitely during a trial, and I think it was this one. A report that was located on Part 2, page 14 of the FBI document, was issued on December 8th, 1970, and it says the following. Previously, department attorney had arranged with the judge to limit hours of trial with frequent intermissions in view of Gambino's heart condition. However, judge has now ruled that Gambino's life would be severely in jeopardy if he were to stand trial. Now, because of the danger that was being posed to his health were he to stand trial, he was officially severed from the case. And that case continued on against the other 4 defendants. And although Gambino was severed from the case, the judge ruled that if Gambino's health improved, he could be tried at a later date. Page 22 stated that the other 4 defendants were acquitted of all charges on December 15, 1970. It was then announced on May 14, 1973, that all prosecution against him regarding this case would cease, pending the outcome of the next set of just trickery that they decided that they were going to launch against him, a brand new deportation attempt. A new case was started up on page 43 after he was severed from the case, and this new case was trying to deport him again. He was issued an order of supervision by Immigration and Natural Services, what we now know as ICE, on July 12, 1973. Now, again, even though, once again, he was never one time ever found guilty of anything. He wasn't even tried for anything. Everyone else in that trial was acquitted, and he would have been way better off if he just stood trial, because he would have been acquitted. But because he was severed from the case, they never tried him on anything. So because they never tried him on anything, they never acquitted him like they did the other 4 defendants that were standing trial for this case. And because he never stood trial, and because the government had the ability to come back and try him if his health improved, the government could just continue coming after him for this case, even though everyone else was acquitted for it. Now, with this order of supervision, it ruled that he would have to have permission from ICE in order to be away from the New York City area for any time longer than 48 hours. And everything that was brought against him at the time said that they were, again, starting to attempt to deport him, but that he continues to claim that he is too ill to travel. The case was turned into inactive status on July 2nd, 1974, and all investigations stopped. Once or twice a year, they would file a memo that said the same thing. There's one for January 5th, 1975, July 9th, 1975, January 13th, 1976, and it all stopped on October 22nd, 1976, after he passed away. So it was a very low maintenance thing. Now, honestly, one thing that I have noticed throughout this entire case, every single page that I've looked at with Gambino, it is extremely and abundantly clear that the FBI was just fucking with people by putting this out. I have never seen so many redactions on pages that were made available, pages that were just straight up not provided, and the ones that were provided, the ink is so worn down that it's 100% impossible to tell what it says. Here's page 113 of part 2 of the FBI's file. You tell me what it says. I don't know. There's a few words that I can make out. I see the word embezzlement, conspiracy, Carlo Gambino, boss, but that's about it. And this is how most of the pages look. So yeah, more than likely what happened is that somebody went and they filed a Freedom of Information Act request to get these records released, and the FBI did it. But Jesus Christ, did they do everything in their power to make sure that you could not read any of it. So I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I did not completely finish reading the FBI reports before I made the last episodes. I made them based on parts 1 through 3, but there's 14 parts of FBI paperwork on Gambino, and each one of those parts is about 120 pages. So I went through 1 through 3 to make all the previous parts that I've made on Gambino, but now I'm proud to say that I have officially finished the FBI report. Now, because I didn't finish them the last time, I didn't catch a few things, and I want to add them now, because even though I've gone over these topics, I want to throw this in there so that you guys are aware of it, even if I went over this stuff already and I left this part out. So in part 2, I talked to you guys about a bunch of companies that Gambino was associated with or had ownership in. But these 2 companies were not mentioned because they didn't pop up until later parts. They never showed up in parts 1 through 3. As I said, I have officially finished reading the FBI reports, but these businesses didn't show up until way later, so I didn't bring them up before, but I want to bring them up now. One company that I found that I hadn't mentioned before was Peggy Ann Dress Company, and that company was located in Rockville, Pennsylvania. The second company that I found, there was only 2, but the second company that I found was called Linda Ann Fashions Incorporated, and that had multiple locations. Linda Ann Fashions Incorporated had locations at 229 West 36th Street, 253 West 26th Street, and 501 7th Avenue, and all of those locations were in New York City. Gambino had no loyalties when it came to who his lawyer was. There is so many different names. Every single time he gets arrested, he has a new lawyer. And when you read through the FBI report, it's actually kind of funny because you can see how salty the FBI is. Like, they do not like this man. They hate Gambino with like a burning, fiery passion. In part 3, pages 48 through 50, they are full of salt, like very, very obvious about the fact that they just do not like him. On page 48, they're talking about how they were asking him for an address of his brother Paul, and Carlo couldn't provide an address. But they say Gambino stated that he was unable to furnish the address of his brother, Paul Gambino, although he saw his brother 2 to 3 times per week. Oh, okay, FBI, like, I felt that heat. I felt that shade. So did everybody else. We get it. On page 50, they list his description as a hawk nose, prominent Roman nose, and a flashy dresser. They might as well have just said dirty Italian with a big ass nose and gangster money. They did later on mention that he had a scar on his nose and a scar on his back, operation scars on both kidneys and on the thorax, a small mole on his right cheek, and a scar on his lower lip. And these descriptions change as time goes on. They add more scars, they add more surgery scars, and they talk more shit about his nose. Later on page 73, they start to discuss some additional crimes that they believe that Gambino had partaken in. They mention that he and his brother are involved in narcotics smuggling activities. And then on page 74, they say that he is running a narcotics smuggling ring between Palermo and the United States on behalf of Salvatore Lucania, or as we know him, Lucky Luciano. They then mention that they believe that he's involved in smuggling Sicilian aliens in 1948. They also mention how both Gambino brothers went back to Italy to meet up with Lucky at their family home, and that Lucky had been extradited, and that's why it was necessary for the Gambino brothers to travel to Sicily to see Lucky Luciano. Starting on page 81, they expand on how he was involved in alien smuggling. They tell this multi-page story that makes it extremely clear that they are throwing rocks at a wall trying to nail this man. There's stories about fake dock passes that are issued under fake names to neighbors of Gambino's, and that must mean that he's involved in human trafficking. They get a little deeper into the matter on page 93, and I'm just going to read directly from the FBI file for this part because it's easier than me trying to summarize it. The Gambinos were reported to exercise control of the narcotics smuggling activities between the mafia element in Palermo and the United States on behalf of Salvatore Lucania, and during 1948, both Gambino brothers met with Lucania at the home of their relatives in Palermo, Sicily. Investigation conducted by the Bureau of Narcotics after 30-some-odd Sicilian aliens had been smuggled into the United States aboard the SS Panorama at the port of Philadelphia during May of 1948 disclosed that Carlo Gambino was involved in the smuggling of these aliens, and that some of these aliens, in turn, had smuggled substantial quantities of heroin into the United States as payment for being brought into the country. Investigation further developed the information that among those interested in the smuggling of these aliens was a representative of the Santo Sorge Trading Company, 196 First Avenue in New York City. This company is operated by Santo Sorge, an intimate associate of Salvatore Lucania, and it will be recalled that immediately prior to his apprehension at the Appellation, Joseph Bonanno was observed at Palermo, Sicily in the company of Santo Sorge. The FBI paperwork says the following, and before I even read it, I'm gonna let you know it is an all-out, bold-faced lie. It reads, Gambino's record dates back to December 12, 1930, when he was arrested for larceny in the operation of a handkerchief pill game. He subsequently was convicted on several occasions for violations of the federal alcohol tax laws. I'm saying that's an all-out, bold-faced lie because Gambino has one conviction and one conviction only. So to say that he has multiple convictions on several different occasions is a bold-faced lie. The man did a total of 22 months in prison and they were consecutive. And that's all he was ever actually convicted of or sentenced to. Even those 22 months, he never really did. He was ordered to do jail time, put in the U.S. Penitentiary Lewisburg on May 23, 1939, and released on bail on May 27, 1939. That is 4 days. A letter on January 21, 1939, said that the judgment was reversed and that a new trial was ordered, and I can't find any proof that that new trial ever took place. He was arrested on June 15, 1937, with 8,150 gallons of alcohol that were non-taxed in a tank car. He was sentenced to 22 months on May 9, 1939. The sentence was suspended. He paid a $5,000 fee, pled guilty, got a 12-month sentence, but a sentence of 11 months and 29 days was suspended. He never did jail time, period. He was arrested on February 7, 1940, in relation to a bootleg alcohol operation, but charges were dropped when the attorney's office conceded that the indictments were based on wiretapping evidence, and I'm guessing because they dropped the charges, those wiretaps were not legal. So therefore, fruit of a poison tree. Anything that they were able to gain from an illegally placed wiretap is illegal, can't be used against him. He purchased the summer home at 34 Club Drive in Massapequa on Long Island. Quick interjection here. I didn't realize when I first recorded this episode, but I'm noticing now, and this is the first time I've ever seen this in my entire life. When you go to 34 Club Drive in Massapequa, the address is literally blurred out. I've heard of them doing this for politicians that have gotten death threats against them and stuff like that, but for a location that belonged to a gangster that died in the 70s is absolutely wild work. I am blown away that you can't see this house on Google Maps. This is absolutely crazy. And that was for him to reside at during the summer months. And it honestly seems like he went to Miami or Florida during the winter months. But I guess if he wasn't in Miami or Florida, he would be in New York City. This boy did not play about his illegal alcohol, though. On top of the 8,150 gallons that he was caught with in 1937, the court came after him for $1,365,879.66 in 1947 for unpaid taxes on alcohol that was manufactured illegally using the company that he owned called Industrial Products Company, which was located in Carlsbad, New Jersey, and the Buildings, Hoisting, and Equipment Company offices in New York City, both owned and operated by Carlo and his brother Paul during 1931 to 1933. Page 47 of Part 4 of the FBI file says the following. ATU File 3310-M contained a report dated November 26, 1934, wherein it was stated, since the coming of Prohibition, there has been in the city of New York and vicinity, and extending into the state of New Jersey, a notorious, daring group of bootleggers, known as the Gambino outfit. The principal members of the outfit are Carlo Gambino, his brother Paul Gambino, and their cousin Anthony Gambino. The file contained a report dated November 21st, 1935, reflecting that the Newark police on May 22, 1933, found at 21 Coy's Place in Newark, New Jersey, 2 large storage tanks that were filled with pure alcohol, together with a large quantity of 5-gallon cans. They were held up by 14 men who took their guns and drove away with a van load of 5-gallon tanks of pure alcohol. The report stated that this was a Gambino drop. The file contained information of an investigation extending over a period of 2 years, which had for its purpose the assessment and collection of unpaid taxes amounting to about $8 million. The seizure was turned over to federal authorities, and while some prohibition agents were engaged in taking an inventory, in which the Gambino outfit played a prominent part. According to the file, the case was expected to come up to the U.S. District Court, Newark, New Jersey. And that is absolutely wild to think about. Think about what that says. That says that there was agents that were cataloging illegal alcohol, and gangsters came up, held them up, took their guns, and took the alcohol. And they were like, nah, you're not taking this. And took it, which is just absolutely crazy. Like, what a time to be alive, man. In 1964, betrayal rocked the inner workings of the Mafia Commission. In a takeover plot that was very similar to the one that we saw Carlo Gambino and Vito Genovese actually pull off, Joseph Bonanno decided that he was going to gain more power by taking out 2 rival bosses, Tommy Lucchese and Carlo Gambino. Now, remember, these 2 have kids that are married, so they are thick as thieves nowadays. They went in on a bunch of rackets together. They worked together to sway votes on the commission on a regular basis, and they're just very chummy. Well, Joseph Bonanno does not like this. He wanted that coveted capo di tutti capi position, or at the very least, he wanted to have more voting power on the commission as it stood right then and there. He enlisted the services of Joseph Colombo, an up-and-comer in the Profaci family. Now, Colombo was not really that important. He wasn't high up, but he was very ruthless. So he was perfect for this job. Now, after being hired, Colombo pulled a bait and switch, and instead of trying to take out Lucchese and Gambino, he turned around and went to them and told them about Bonanno's plot to have them killed. Now, according to myth, Stefano Magaddino was a part of this plot. Bonanno was going to take out Lucchese, Gambino, and Magaddino. But as I said in my Bonanno video, I never believed that for a second. Magaddino was Bonanno's cousin. He never would have made an actual move against him. Anyway, that plan was thwarted. Joseph Bonanno disappeared, and he resurfaced a few years later, claiming that he had been kidnapped by Magaddino. But in all reality, he was just hiding away in Arizona because he had criminal charges against him, and the Mafia Commission wanted to kill him, so he just ran away. That whole debacle led to the Bonanno family losing their seat on the commission for a good long while, and Joseph Colombo was installed as the boss of the family that still carries his name to this day. Now, this family is wild, okay? Page 88 through 89 has me baffled. I have no idea what the hell is going on here. So, from what I can tell, Carlo's brother Paul married another one of their cousins. There's a marriage license dated February 10th, 1958 between Paolo Gambino and Catherine Castellano. Yes, that is the same name of Carlo's wife, and the last name of both of these guys' mom. Honestly, I was fully convinced that Paul was marrying Carlo's wife. The only thing that makes me think and know that that's not the case is that Carlo and Catherine Gambino are listed as witnesses to this wedding between Paul and Catherine Castellano. So the only thing that I can think is that Gambino's mom had a few brothers. At least one of her brothers had a daughter named Catherine, so Carlo took one and Paul took the other. Really gross, but whatever, they're brother cousins now, so yay for them. Now, one thing that I find really interesting is how many newspaper articles are referenced and listed in full in the FBI files. You can find tons of newspaper articles and summaries of the articles in these files. So every time you see a newspaper article and you think like, ugh, they don't know what they're talking about, this doesn't even matter. Like, yes, it does. The FBI is cataloging this stuff. And even if they don't believe the stuff that's in there, they're listing it in the FBI files for these people. And they're putting it into the permanent criminal file that they're making against that person. So these newspapers that we all just kind of disregard and don't think that they know what they're talking about, that actually matters. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been doing this a long time. I've read a lot of FBI files, and I have always seen these newspaper articles listed, summarized. Everything about these newspaper articles are in there. But I still find it absolutely wild that even if we don't think that the information in the newspaper article is relevant or true, it's still something that the FBI is cataloging and keeping against the person that they're keeping this FBI file on. On page 11 and 12 of the FBI file, they show that Carlo Gambino had his house searched on August 5th, 1969. He had it searched by the FBI after he had been subpoenaed to testify on June 9th, 1969 in regards to a conspiracy case. He was being called to answer questions about Anthony Scotto. Yes, that is Rosanna Scotto's father. I've talked about this before on my channel, but Rosanna Scotto, the talk show host on Fox 5 News, is a mafia princess. She even married a mafia prince. Her husband, Louis Ruggiero, is the nephew of Angelo Ruggiero, Gotti's BFF, and the dude that kicked off the Mafia Commission trials. You could see it in her family, too. There is some wild stories that comes out of that family. For a famous news anchor, she's got some shit, man. Her son, Louis Ruggiero Jr., testified against his friend, Larry DeLeon, that had killed a man named Joseph Comunale at a Connecticut house party and then disposed of his body. DeLeon told Ruggiero about this at the gym afterwards, and Ruggiero sat on a witness stand and told the jury everything that his friend had told him. It's like his father and his grandfather had taught him absolutely nothing. News articles about Ruggiero Jr. mention Anthony Scotto as his grandfather, and they mention his link to the Gambino family, but they fail to mention any connection to Angelo Ruggiero, and he has the same last name. Isn't it crazy how Rosanna Scotto is this super famous and serious news anchor? She's on the news every day, and you would have no idea that she's all kinds of wrapped up in the mafia world. Like, that's wild to me. So anyways, back to Gambino. During this search, they find 4 different keys to 4 different safety deposit boxes. And they decide that they're going to go and they're going to break into all of these safety deposit boxes. 3 of those safety deposit boxes have pretty regular things, but one of them turned up exactly what they were looking for. The one that they were interested in had $27,000 in cash and $109,000 in jewelry in this one safety deposit box. And one of the items of jewelry, a $30,000 bracelet, was confirmed to be a part of loot that was stolen in a robbery of Theodore White Jewelry, which is a jewelry store in New York, New York. And in that jewelry heist, 2 males and 1 female committed an armed robbery of around $100,000 in jewelry on December 6, 1967. They searched and they couldn't find Gambino's fingerprints on the deposit slips, but they tried. When they found this safety deposit box and they found the piece of jewelry that was involved in the heist, they issued a warrant, but they issued that warrant for Gambino's wife, Catherine Gambino. She was ordered to testify before a federal grand jury in New York City, but she just decided she wasn't going to go. She didn't appear. Carlo was then arrested on March 23, 1970 in Brooklyn in relation to a charge of interstate transportation of stolen property. You can see this on page 99 of the FBI document, and he was arrested in relation to an armored car robbery involving around $6 million. And we already talked about this a little earlier. This is the Brinks armored security vehicle that was robbed, and I think they got somewhere around like $3 to $5 million, a little bit over $5 million, and Carlo was supposed to be responsible for washing the money. It's interesting, though, that they tried to make his wife testify. She told them to go screw themselves, didn't testify, and then a few months later, they magically come up with this charge against Carlo Gambino. In this memo, they note that Gambino had taken over for Vito Genovese, who died in prison the prior year. Gambino is described as the most powerful member of a 9-man national commission. This release was made by J. Edgar Hoover himself. Now, this arrest all stemmed from testimony of John J. Red Kelly. Kelly had implicated Gambino in his testimony, so let's discuss him, but it's going to be brief because this guy is absolutely full of shit. John J. Red Kelly was an Irish gangster that was an associate of the Patriarca family. He claims that he was involved in the plot to kill Fidel Castro. And if you want to know about the whole Bay of Pigs disaster, I covered it pretty in depth in my Carlos Marcello video. You could go take a look at that video. I don't really want to go over it here, but you could go look at that video if you want. And in that video, I go in depth about how the United States government contracted the mafia to try to take out Fidel Castro. And when it was unsuccessful, the Bay of Pigs disaster happened, and that was a whole train wreck. The thing to note here, though, is that Kelly claimed that he's an associate of the Patriarca family. He testified against Raymond Patriarca, earning him a 10-year sentence in prison, but it was overturned a year later when it was proven that not only was Kelly a lying sack of shit, but so was the FBI agent, Paul Rico, that had testified as well. On page 111, it was released on February 2nd, 1971, that Dennis Dillon, special attorney in charge of the strike force, advised that he could discern no federal violation on the matter and he would not be moving forward with prosecution. And honestly, this makes all the sense in the world. Agents jumped the gun on this one. They were so eager to get Gambino that they just lied through their teeth to get this search warrant in the first place, which destroyed the entire case before it even began. You're telling me that there was a robbery of a jewelry store on Madison Avenue in New York City, and an armored vehicle was robbed in New York, and the proof of that was found in a safety deposit box in Brooklyn. But you have grounds to investigate this through the FBI as an interstate transportation of stolen property case? Absolutely not, and they lost because of it. It also didn't help that Kelly was absolutely full of shit, and they proved that. And the guys that he had put away for 10 years were released a year later. So this entire case that the FBI had built against Gambino and Patriarca and all the guys that they really just wanted to put away was all thrown out and nothing stuck. One thing that I do find interesting, though, is that it shows that while all this stuff is going on, the FBI does not know anything. The fact that they thought that Gambino only had power because he succeeded Vito Genovese shows that they didn't listen to a word of Valachi's testimony. And they didn't believe that he was already the boss of a family, and that Genovese's death wouldn't really do that much in terms of power for Carlo Gambino, because Genovese was the boss of a completely separate family. So let's talk real quick about something really important that happened in 1972. Carlo Gambino's nephew, Manny, was kidnapped by a rival gang. An Irish gangster, Jimmy from Queens McBratney, kidnapped Manny after continually kidnapping a bunch of Italian gangsters. He would grab them, he would head up their family, he would demand six-figure payouts for their return, and this had been going on for over a year by the time they stumbled on Manny. The fallout was pretty brutal though, so let's go through it. Jimmy McBratney was an Irish-American gangster. He was 6'3", weighed around 250 pounds. He's a weightlifter, so you know the type. I pick things up, I put them down type of shit. Like, that's him to a T. So while he was in Greenhaven Correctional Facility for an armored robbery charge, he was described as being very quiet. This is something that really attracted Edward Maloney, another Irish Mafia member. Maloney said that McBratney was a really good listener, and before long, the two were discussing robberies that they would pull off as soon as they got out of jail. Now, McBratney, he's an avid gun nut. He knew everything there was to know about guns, and he wanted to become a gun collector. Let me tell you, the best way to start building your gun collection in New York, out of all places, is to catch an armored robbery charge. Very smart. That's okay though, because he really didn't plan on acquiring these guns legally anyway. He regularly pulled off armored robberies, kidnappings, he ran guns, so that's how he wanted to fund this gun collection, and nothing about it was going to be legal. I do feel like, though, that there's certain guns that are really rare, that you would have to get them legally. Like, the only places that sell them are actual legitimate shops. So if you really want to be a gun collector, you have to have the ability to buy a gun. There's only so far you can go with illegal guns. His ultimate dream was to take all the earnings that he had earned from illegal activities, and he wanted to open a nightclub. Now, this dude had a whole lot of dreams and all kinds of ambitions, but they would never actually go anywhere because there's no way in hell that a liquor board would give him a liquor license with all of this criminal record. It just would never happen. Especially when you factor in his known association with Carlo Gambino and Joseph Colombo and the crime families that they come with. It would absolutely never happen. A lot of people think that McBratney was the leader of this kidnapping gang, but he wasn't. He was just the middleman, or like a dude in the group. He was never the leader. There was some group of Irish Mafia members in a kidnap ransom ring. Warren Sherman and Joseph Kilcullen were in this group, and they recruited Robert Center. Center had ties to the Gambino crime family. He was an associate. I mean, he's Irish, he can't be a made guy or anything, but his nephew, Anthony Center, was an associate within the Mafia. We know Anthony Center from our episode of Roy DeMeo. They also recruited Thomas Genovese, who was in the Colombo family. Thomas Genovese was a distant relative to Vito Genovese, the slimiest guy that has ever lived. So we know the kind of person we're talking about here. And if you can be recruited by an Irish gang that's kidnapping Italian members of the crime organization, you're probably a pretty shitty person. The group recruited McBratney to be part of this kidnapping ring in October of 1972. Now, Filippo and Ronald Milano were made men in the Gambino crime family, and they hired the group to kidnap a mafia member. They had some beef with this dude, and they come up with this big, elaborate revenge plot. They also said they wanted 10% of the ransom payment. Now, this group, they had kidnapped a man named Francesco Manzo, a Lucchese family capo, at a restaurant in Forest Hills, New York called The Sweet. And this kidnapping went perfectly. It was successful. Carmine Tremonti paid $150,000 for Manzo to be returned safely. And this is just beautiful in these guys' eyes. When the group learned that they could successfully get paid ransom payments for mafia members, and it would go off and the mafia wouldn't go and rat them out, they are pumped. This is great news. They pulled off 2 more kidnappings of members of the mafia, one of them being Emanuele Gambino, Carlo Gambino's nephew. Emanuele Manny Gambino, a 29-year-old gangster, that is obviously the nephew of Carlo Gambino, so he would have a certain leg up in the family. He is in the custody of these psychopaths, and nobody has any idea where the hell he went. Nobody has any idea where to look. Can you imagine being the most powerful gangster in the entire world, and there's literally nothing you can do when your nephew gets kidnapped? Like, that's gotta be terrible. I can't imagine how that would feel. I mean, it would be terrible either way, but just to add icing onto the cake, like, you're freaking Carlo Gambino. So now, to top this all off, they start getting letters. Emmanuel's wife gets a letter demanding a ransom of $350,000 to return her husband to her safe and sound. And now, as I said, this group had been operating for a year, so this whole thing, it's not unheard of. The kidnap ransom shtick is tried and true. It's been used forever. What is unusual, though, is that Emmanuel was already dead. Emmanuel's wife had been working with the kidnappers and paying them, trying to get her husband back. She had already paid $40,000 out to them. Now, while they're getting paid by Emmanuel's wife, they attempted to kidnap a man named Junior. Some people assume that this is Vincent D'Amore. It's really not confirmed exactly who Junior is. Now, this is the 4th mafia kidnapping that this group is pulling off. And the whole mafia is on high alert. They know that these kidnappings are taking place. They know that if they have any association with the mafia, they're being targeted. They're looking for these guys. And these guys have a gigantic set of balls, and they're kidnapping made mafia members. But when they kidnapped Junior, shit went all the way sideways. They got him into the car after a struggle, and they had a fight amongst themselves when one of the dudes forgot to blindfold him. When the leader of the group stopped the car to yell at the guy that forgot, Junior was able to escape the car and he took off running. Now, during all of this craziness, 2 neighborhood kids see this all go down and they get the license plate off the truck. Now, like 2 good old boys raised in the neighborhood, they did not go to the police. They went straight to their relative who was in the mafia, and because of those 2 kids, they were finally able to identify who it was that was kidnapping everybody. On May 22nd, 1973, McBratney is hanging out at Snopes Bar and Grill on Staten Island, and he's having a drink. He's minding his business, he's chilling. All of a sudden, who should walk in but John Gotti, Angelo Ruggiero, and Ralph Galione, and they come in pretending to be cops. They tell McBratney that he's under arrest and that he has to leave the bar with them. But while they're trying to get him to exit the bar, another person that's at the bar intervenes. It turns chaotic. This turns into a whole shit show. This was supposed to be super simple, snatch and grab, but everything goes off course. So what's the best way to deal with chaos? Cause more chaos. Shit already went sideways. Why not? So Galione popped off 2 shots into the ceiling and orders everybody at the bar to stand against the wall. A waitress that's working at the time, she has a set of balls, and she slips away and she calls the cops. These 3 are still struggling, trying to get McBratney out of the bar, so instead of struggling further, Galione walks up and shoots him 3 times at close range in front of everybody. Now, because his nephew had been kidnapped and had been killed, Carlo Gambino had put out a contract on McBratney's head and told everybody in his crime family that whoever killed McBratney would get immediate initiation as a made man into the Gambino crime family. But because all of this went down so publicly, all 3 of these guys were immediately identified by witnesses. Gotti and Ruggiero were indicted on murder charges, and Gambino hired Roy Cohn to represent them. Sound familiar? Galione did not catch a murder charge. Why? Because when Galione was leaving his apartment, he was killed. Because witnesses had identified Galione as the one that pulled the trigger, Cohn was able to get Ruggiero and Gotti a deal where they each did 4 years on attempted manslaughter, which is absolutely wild to serve time on an attempted manslaughter charge when there was an actual murder. This is not manslaughter. There was no attempt. Dude is dead. And you can tell that at this point, Carlo Gambino is out for blood. He wants all the blood for every single person that was involved in this, and I don't blame him. You don't just go around robbing people and killing people. Like, who knows what happened with Emmanuel, but you don't kill the nephew of Carlo Gambino and think you're gonna walk away scot-free. There's nothing wrong with the revenge and the absolute mayhem that he unleashed on this group of kidnappers. Carlo Gambino was investigated in December of 1974 because another guy in this group, Henry Center, was poisoned while he was in jail. So sad. Now, in part 14 of the FBI files, they state that there was a wire that was requested and approved at the Massapequa residence and the business locations of SGS Associates, the company that Gambino owned. So they're placing wires everywhere that Carlo Gambino goes. Page 62 says, this microphone was installed in the office of SGS Associates, a real estate front organization of Carlo Gambino, leader of the Gambino family of La Cosa Nostra. They even got a wire into the hotel room that he stayed at in Miami for a week or two. Like, he had surgery, he had heart surgery, he took convalescence leave, he went to Miami to recover, and he was in a hotel room in Miami for like 2 weeks, and they got a bug into that hotel room. Do you understand how crazy that is? To go through the lengths of getting a bug in a hotel room before you even know what hotel room he's going to be staying in. So if you're someone that was staying in a hotel at the same time as Carlo Gambino in Miami, more than likely your room was bugged as well. Because I don't know what else they possibly could have done than go in there and bug every single room in that entire hotel. Because there's no way they got the hotel to give him a specific room, because if they had, somebody, some cashier that makes $8 an hour that wants to be in the good graces of Carlo Gambino would have told him. Like, that's a fact, period. So the only logical conclusion is that they bugged every single room in this hotel, which is just disturbing. They listened to conversations between him and his wife. They noted that Carlo and Catherine Gambino were at their Massapequa residence, but no conversation of any pertinence whatsoever took place. The television was on most of the time, and an occasional word was spoken as to meals. So he's just living like a grandpa life. They mentioned that because of the use of an air conditioner in the personal home and the business location, information that was obtained during summer months was a lot more sparse than it would be in the winter when an air conditioner wouldn't be on. So, if you're trying to beat a wire and you're not 100% sure if there's a wire in your place, an air conditioner is not a terrible idea. I mean, I feel like nowadays in 2024, the wires are probably so advanced that an air conditioner would mean absolutely nothing. But back then, air conditioner was the way to do it. Page 44 says that on June 16th, 1964, Gambino and Redacted were in a conversation about the concrete business. At that time, Gambino was overheard to say that he was going to break open someone's head. Redacted calmed the angry Gambino about this matter. And this is stuff that's just being picked up by the wire that was placed in his house. So it's not even coming from a rat. Now, as far as the wire that was located at his personal residence, Gambino was able to locate that wire and he killed it. A report on page 70, dated December 18, 1964, says that the wire was determined missing after surreptitious entry to determine reason for operational failure. Another surreptitious entry made early this morning, and through the search of premises, including desks, personal attaché cases, several cabinets, closets, and other possible locations, failed to locate unit. Good. Like, that's so messed up, man. Imagine being like a 60, 70-year-old frail, unhealthy man that's just living your life watching television with your wife and asking her what's for dinner, and you have a friggin' wire in your house that's so invading. At the end of Gambino's life, shit just starts to fall all the way apart for this poor man. Both of his sons got together and sued him for $37,000 on March 29, 1973. They're suing him for federal income taxes. His brother died in February of 1974. It's also at the very end, in the very last year that he was alive, that the bosses of the mafia ganged up on him and overruled him. The books have been closed all the way since 1957, and it is now 1976. That is 19 going on 20 years that not one man has been made into the mafia. That's a long friggin' time. A lot of these guys are getting restless. They're pulling off murders, hijacks, doing jail time. They're doing all of this shit to prove themselves to gain entry into arguably the most prestigious secret society that has ever existed. All to be told no because Carlo Gambino is still alive. Just wait until Carlo Gambino dies, you'll get it then. And they're getting antsy. All of these guys are being told that Gambino's gonna die soon, and as soon as he died, they'd be pushed to the head of the line to get their button. But by 1976, they had been hearing that Gambino was gonna die soon for 20 years, and they are over it. The commission held a vote, and Carlo Gambino was overruled for the first time in 20 years. They did meet in the middle, though. They would make new members, but they would just dip their toes into the water. 10 buttons were handed to each of the 5 families, initiating 50 new guys into La Cosa Nostra. They would soon come to regret that. In this new class of made members, 2 of these 50 guys stand out. It was 1976 when this group of 50 men were handed buttons for the first time since the Appalachian meeting. Excluding Gotti and Ruggiero, they were special circumstances. Now, Gambino had worked his absolute hardest to keep those books closed for a few reasons. First, Anastasia had been accused of selling memberships for $50,000. That is not the way that you're supposed to earn your button, and Gambino viewed the entire title as being trumped up and not really worth much anymore after that whole buying your way in thing. Another thing that had him digging his heels in, fighting to not allow anyone new in, was his persistent fear of rats. He was convinced that making new men would give a whole crop of new people access to the inner workings of the mafia. And if Joseph Valachi taught us anything, it's that you really don't have to be an important guy if you're made to be able to do some serious damage. Another huge reason was Gambino's abhorrence to the new group of people, and he wasn't wrong. He viewed these newer gangsters, these Americanized ones that had been born or grown up in America, as not having the moral background as the guys that were born and raised in Italy. It's been a while since omerta meant anything, and the strong sentences that were being handed down in RICO charges and drug trials had Gambino ready to move mountains to keep these books closed and preserve this organization that he had a hand in creating. That is a little hypocritical though, because if you remember, Gambino had been a member of the Young Turks, a group of Americanized younger gangsters that were fighting the Mustache Petes, and in his older age, he just turned into one. I feel like I can pretty confidently say that younger Gambino would have been ashamed of older Gambino. On February 17, 1976, Gambino was outvoted 4-1 in favor of allowing a new crop of soldiers to prick their finger and burn the picture of the saint in their hands and officially become inducted as made men. But this year would prove pretty disastrous and prove exactly what Gambino had been trying to say all along. Joseph Pistone, an undercover agent, had infiltrated the mafia, and he came in 1976. And he came damn close to getting a button in the Bonanno family. They wouldn't know that for a few years, but that's when he entered the mafia. Another tragedy to come out of that crop was Sammy the Bull Gravano. He was one of the guys that had been handed one of those 10 buttons from his family, and he was able to be made because of this decision, because Gambino had been outvoted 4-1. He would later turn state's evidence and take down the whole Gambino crime family with him. You can now find him talking about the ruin that he caused, saying he's better than other rats because he didn't wear a wire, and calling women who get abortions murderers on YouTube. So he's a great guy. Later that same year, Carlo Gambino died of heart disease on October 15th, 1976, at his home in Massapequa on Long Island. The wake was at Cusimano and Russo Funeral Home, and his funeral was held at Our Lady of Grace Church in Brooklyn. He was buried at St. John's Cemetery in Queens. And this will prove to you that times never change. The New York Times reported that Gambino had received the swine flu vaccine shortly before his death, and people went wild, assuming that it was the vaccine that killed him. Sound familiar? Sounds very similar to the recent pandemic we had and the vaccine that came out with that too, no? Big Paul Castellano was appointed as the boss of the Gambino crime family, with Dellacroce left as the underboss. And that had a lot of implications. A lot of people viewed it as a slight that Castellano was put in place as the boss of the family, even though Castellano was Gambino's cousin. When Castellano was promoted as the boss instead of Dellacroce, it split the Gambino crime family into 2 factions, which had kind of a passive-aggressive war. Nobody died, but they definitely glared at each other. I don't really want to go into the whole reason of why Paul Castellano was killed, but I do discuss it in great detail in my video about John Gotti, so if you're interested in that story, I'll make sure that the John Gotti episode is in the description of this video, so if you want to go check that out, I'll make sure it's there, so go check it out if you're interested. Most sources say that the main character in the movies The Godfather was written based on Carlo Gambino. Because of Valachi's testimony, that crime family in New York that has seen numerous bosses throughout the years is still to this day known as the Gambino crime family, and it always will be. The family is still standing strong to this day, and there's articles in the newspapers pretty much on a daily basis about Gambino crime family members being arrested, tried, and jailed. Gambino definitely goes down as one of the most infamous gangsters of all time. I'm happy I did this episode, even though I really didn't want to, because I always held a lot of hate for him for his role in Anastasia's death, but I'm happy I did it. I was able to overcome a little bit of the hate that I had for him when he helped to put Genovese away, but since we all know that he just did that to gain more power, there's still a lot of hate there. But he was still a very interesting person to cover, so thank you to the thousands of people that requested that I cover him. If you really think about it, the story of Carlo Gambino is actually so crazy and inspirational, so it's definitely a wild one. I've already decided that next week I'm going to be covering Stefano the Undertaker Magaddino. Now, honestly, I was fully planning on gaslighting you guys and telling you that I had never done a video on him before, but there's a viewer that was writing a screenplay on Magaddino, and he realized almost immediately that I took the video down. The real reason that it was taken down is because I was clearly in the middle of some kind of mental breakdown when I made that video. I looked like a clown. I had pink makeup all the way up to like my eyebrows. It was embarrassing. I cringed every time I saw it. I had to take it down. So because I took it down, I'm now gonna go in and I'm gonna re-record it. I'm gonna do a more in-depth video that's gonna have multiple parts and a lot more information on him. Let me know if there's anybody that you would like to see me cover next. Obviously, since I did this video, I take requests, because I did not want to cover Carlo Gambino. I did everything in my power to not cover him. Thanks so much for watching. Join me next week as I continue to delve into the lives and legacies of some of history's most notorious criminals and gangsters. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, follow, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!